ethnocentric. It becomes tribalistic. And there's lots of good in that. And of course, as in every worldview, there's loads of bad things about it too. So basically, to say it in a very simple manner, that's where wars come from. These warring ideas of us versus them. That's the view of the world when we are standing here at the second floor of the house. Okay. Then when evolution again nudges us forward and we go and enter the third level of the house, our thinking becomes rational. So rationality enters the picture in the sense that our cognitive abilities become logical. They are based on not only common sense, but in these logical, abstract calculations that come online basically at age 12 to 16. We developmental psychologists have all sorts of fancy names for these, but I try and keep them simple and just speak about these levels and these views that they enable. Okay, so this is the modern rational level, and then we all have again, these levels. We can subdivide them as much as we want to, but this fourth level, which happened basically from the beginning of the 60s, is the postmodern worldview, the pluralistic, multidimensional, multifaceted worldview, which leads to basically no single truth being right. It leads to loads of good things. Again, loads of minorities can get to say their say, but it also leads to lots of intellectual confusion, which we are seeing globally at the moment. And this is basically, when we are speaking about culture wars, we are speaking about the dilemma that these three worldviews, the fourth level, third level, and the second level, or traditional, modern, postmodern, they do not see the same reality. They see a different version of a reality. And they're talking about this reality is not commensurate, or what's the word? They do not speak about the same reality. In fact, they are speaking about three different versions of reality. So in order to illustrate this further, I hope, I amassed a stack of books here at my at my desk to show how this applies in leadership, because that's what I do for a living. I do executive coaching. I work with organizations and try to help people in organizations, both governmental and also private sector, to understand complexity. Okay, so when the first level, the egocentric, approaches leadership and tries to give advice about leadership, these are the types of books that that they write, because this is the kind of thinking that is active in them. So here's one, a really good book by Steve Chandler called Wealth Warrior. A really good book on, well, wealth. But you can see the warrior in it, because the first floor of the house is the warrior stage. It's whoever has the biggest guns is the leader. Here's another one, not so good book, but I've read it though. Trump, The Art of the Deal. Really good book if you want to learn the art of the deal in whatever means possible. Then when we enter the second floor of the house, that when thinking goes from egocentric to ethnocentric or traditional, we want to find these immutable laws. So Napoleon Hill, very famous American author who's I think most famous for his book Think and Grow Rich, wrote this massive tome called The Law of Success, on which Think and Grow Rich is based upon. This is really thick, I think 700 pages. And here we have the thinking that tries to enter the world in the form of these immutable laws. We want to find something that works for everybody, everywhere, all the time. This is, by the way, also the level of religious fundamentalism. Time tactics of very successful people. We try and find something to emulate in people who are very successful and try and make it as a mold for everybody else to fit. Or books on strategy, basically, most of them are written from levels 2 or 3. We want to find something that works all the time. Then when our thinking enters the third level, the modern rational level, our thinking becomes very interested in efficiency. So we have books like Peter Drucker's The Effective Executive, which by its title alone, I think it's a perfect metaphor for the third level thinking, where we want to find more efficient ways of doing things, or execution, the discipline of getting things done. Or my favorite, Mager and Pipe's classic, Analyzing Performance Problems. This is right about as modern as you can get in leadership. They even have this very fancy diagram here, how to analyze performance problems, solve them once and for all. On the fourth level, when our thinking becomes postmodern, pluralistic, we tend to invest a lot in conversations. We tend to emphasize softer values. So we have books like Fred Kaufman's Conscious Business, or Patterson and others' classic Crucial Conversations. So conversations and people become really, really important. Or Jim Tam's Radical Collaboration. These are the kinds of things that really, really pique our interest, because we see that most organizations are composed of humans, mostly. And then an interesting shift happens. So basically, all these levels from 1, 2, 3, and 4 are at war against each other, because they all see a version of reality which they think is the right version. Then a shift happens. So for some people, our minds tend to go one step further, and we see the world from fifth level. So that's the level of thinking called integral sometimes. And the books that emerge from that level are really different in leadership. So here's Ginny Whitelaw's The Zen Leader, for example, or Frederic Laloux's book, Reinventing Organizations, which I highly recommend for everybody who works in an organization. So these things reflect the thinking shift that happens when world suddenly starts to appear okay. All of these previous levels are seen as, well, basically okay. That is something that I have to take a stand against. Culture wars are seen, but we do not enter them. And another book also from the fifth level is called 4D Leadership by my colleague from London, Dr. Alan Watkins. So this is what happens. So we have these different gradations of worldviews, right? How much time do I have, by the way? 2 minutes. So 1 minute. So that's 30 seconds for the rest of the very easy steps. So you remember the floor of the house here? It extends all the way up. So these reflect the perspectives. So we have the perspective from upper left, upper right, lower left, and lower right. So we have the perspective of a visionary, the doer, the conversationalist, and the strategist. And these are, unlike the levels, these are just more or less typologies of seeing things, ways of seeing. And if these levels and the views that we see from them are like different languages, then these are like different dialects, basically. Both of them and understanding them lead to better conversations and lead to better understanding, but we do need to understand them. And this is where I end, because I see the red light and the one step is left to our collective imaginations. I thank you all very much.
Thank you very much. And now I'd like to introduce our table topics master. Our table topics master is Fran.